All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Angela Hwang with Reverend Consulting, and I'm really thrilled to introduce our guest today, Thomas Galvin. Thomas and I worked together at Colliers International, and we had a lot of fun working there. And I'm just thrilled that he's joining me for this, informative video. And Thomas, actually, let me just kick it off to you so that you can tell you can talk about your background, your professional experience, and what you're doing now.
That sounds great. Yes, we did work together 10 years ago. I don't want to date ourselves, but we've been in the business for 20 plus years. Currently, I'm working with developers, municipalities, and investors, uh, mostly in repositioning distressed assets. Kind of the core business that we're doing is a lot of malls. It is a lot of office properties. We work with municipalities and trying to figure out what to do with a lot of these office properties that aren't moving and kind of transforming them into taxable assets that kind of help boost their tax base. So we're transforming outdated properties into modern assets and smart redevelopments uh, that kind of more aligns with the current market realities. Like COVID kind of changed everything, and everyone kind of has to reshuffle what it is they're doing. We're trying to deliver strong returns for these municipalities, kind of get them back on their feet, which everyone's trying to adjust to today's economic climate. So that's kind of what we're doing in a nutshell. And kind of as an aside, one of the clients that we work with is actually Colliers Engineering and Design. So as much as I try
Wow.
to get away from it, it's a very small world. So
Indeed.
the company that I work for is Camoin and Associates. We are based in New York and Virginia. We do a lot of work in the New England area. So I'm learning a lot about Connecticut and Maine, New York, those types of areas. But we've also done projects in Nashville. We've done projects in Kalamazoo, Michigan. We've done projects in Chicago. So all over the board here.
Yeah, indeed. So you talked about COVID and like the office market. What do you think has really changed for the commercial real estate industry post-COVID?
Yep. Prior to, well, we'll kind of start. Prior to COVID, there was kind of a big surge in industrial. We had a lot of e-commerce, and you had a lot of kind of traditional malls kind of getting hit, and these are kind of aging malls that people don't really want to put any more money into because they're not going to be producing the income that they were expected. We're starting to see that happen with office properties, especially kind of your Class B, Class C buildings that were built in like the previous to the 80s. So that's kind of a big change. It's been 5 years since COVID. So, just the same way that I remember writing research reports in 2013 talking about the economic recovery, people today are still talking about, oh, return to office, return to normal. But it's been 5 years. And at some point, we just have to accept that this is how it's going to be. And a lot of the work that I do is helping municipalities kind of plan for the future. So, two instances. One is in Pennsylvania. There's kind of an aging mall. They're not quite sure what to do with it. We've been working with a developer to get grant funding to put in the necessary infrastructure, such as uh, sewer pipes and stuff like that, to put in a little casino. So that way, this mall will be like a retail center kind of anchored by a casino. So that's kind of one adaptive reuse. Another one is city in Connecticut has a lot of these office properties, and these were call centers, and these call centers just aren't here anymore. So you have these huge floor plans, and we're just trying to examine whether a residential conversion can make sense or if the place has to be scraped just because the assessed value on these properties has gone way down. and so something has to get done. So that's who our clients are and what we're working with.
I have a question about that. So I watch these segments on CNBC about how some people and developers like they buy like schools that close down or malls
Yeah,
that close down. I recently saw one where
yeah,
they opened like these micro apartments, on
yeah,
like the second floor of the mall. They converted the store into those
yeah,
units. How hard is that? Like with all these like empty, office buildings and so forth. I'm just kind of curious because I feel like it's so easy for people to say, "Oh, just make them into multifamily housing and into
yeah,
apartments." I, I mean, I presume it's very expensive and not as easy as people think it is, right?
yeah. So there's two aspects of it. So there is the is it physically possible aspect, and that is architects and structural engineers. And then there is the is it legal aspect, which is municipalities and zoning. So to get a project like that done, you need a municipality that's willing to work with you and kind of alter the rules, just because this building here was meant for this one use, which is retail. And to turn that retail use into a different type of residential use requires zoning variances. You have to get upgraded infrastructure. A lot of times, that infrastructure, such as sewer pipes or electricity or different parking, uh, no one really wants to pay for that. So, in order to get these projects to pencil out, a lot of times you need government assistance, and that's a lot of the stuff that we try to do. Where here's a grant that this building might qualify for. Here's what can get done in terms of turning this giant, massive parking lot, reducing those parking ratios to try to get more buildings on there. Those types of uses. So it is possible. Um, Sometimes it might not be physically possible, and so you have to scrape it. But a lot of times the hang up is it's just not financially possible, or it's not feasible from a regulation standpoint. And you have to navigate the system to kind of figure out how to get this project to pencil out. So
So what do you think are some of like the strongest asset types right now? It's like, you mentioned like industrial pre-COVID and kind of office as well. I think the office market, everybody's just figuring out that, okay, it's really never gonna be what it was before. This whole,
yeah.
like, working from home and people moving out of like the core, like the urban areas and, like the cities and so forth, they can work anywhere. Like what do you think is like the leading asset class?
Yep. So there's kind of a saying, there's no bad buildings, only bad prices. And so at the right price, anything kind of pencils out or anything will kind of work out. Um, the highest demand from cities and municipalities right now kind of seems to be data centers. So, you have like the Magnificent Seven. They're the kind of the main driver of a lot of the financing, I guess, that goes on right now. Or, in terms of like the stock market, that's kind of where the money is. And so if they need to build a $30 billion data center, they can do that without having to access the private markets. So interest rates are still elevated. That's going to put a crimp on a lot of development. Right now, what we're seeing is multifamily is kind of challenging. A lot was built over the pandemic. Apartment rents rose 30% because everyone kind of moved someplace. So in a lot of these secondary and tertiary markets, you have massive, massive amounts of construction. One municipality that we're working with right now in Connecticut, they got 40 years worth of apartment buildings built in 2 years, just because nothing was built here since the 80s. And then all of a sudden, all these people moved in and rents shot up, and these developers came in and built these projects. And this was possible during the pandemic because interest rates were basically zero. Um, there was some supply chain disruptions, but prices haven't shot up yet, and when labor was still relatively um, cheap. And now everything's on its head, where labor is expensive, materials are expensive, the financing is expensive, and a lot of these projects just don't work unless they have like an affordable housing component to them. And the reason why the affordable housing component makes these projects pencil out is because you get certain tax benefits that can allow this project to get built. So probably over the next year or 2 years, normal multifamily projects will kind of be a lot harder to construct just because rents can only go up so high before you start to get pushback. But these affordable housing, assisted living, senior housing, I think those ones have a lot of subsidies for it. So those projects can kind of still get built out. For retail, your big malls are kind of dead, but like your suburban, power centers, those types of retailers are still doing okay. Drugstores are kind of getting creamed just because now you can get your prescriptions online. So a lot of things that you would have assumed would be safe, like your Walgreens or your Rite Aids, your CVS's, these triple net properties are getting kind of hammered. So, if you're a let everything kind of sit and just collect rent kind of landlord, your tenants might not be as stable as you expect them to be on a retail side. Office, your class B, class C, central business district office buildings are going to kind of suffer, but we're starting to see like smaller office buildings kind of out in the suburbs do okay, just because they don't need these giant tenants to take a whole building. Like you can have a local architecture firm take some space, or you might have an accounting guy take some space. Just kind of small is beautiful on the office side. Creative office is kind of dead for a hot minute there. Life science was the it thing, but then that's kind of faded. So right now, from a property type perspective, it's kind of slim pickings. Like industrial is starting to see kind of some pushback in rents. And these were kind of like all the darlings during the pandemic. And a lot of that is just interest rates. So, real estate is a heavily debt funded venture.
Mm.
And without cheap capital, like all the air goes out of the room. So it's going to be an interesting time for the next couple of years. So
You mentioned affordable housing and how the government, there's tax abatement and some tax opportunities. I'm also hearing more about workforce housing.
yes,
That seems to be up and coming, and there's a distinction between affordable and workforce
yeah,
housing.
yep.
Um,
So affordable housing is usually 80% of area median income, and then workforce housing is 80% to 120%, and it kind of varies by jurisdiction. So each city or county might have different requirements, but that's kind of the general rule is workforce is 120 max on your rents, and then affordable is about 80%. And the amount of affordable housing so when you have a building, it's not 100% affordable. Like you might only need 10% affordable to kind of meet these criteria. So
Okay. So do you think that I guess the outlook is when people, when a lot of developers build these multifamily properties, a lot of that tends to be luxury apartments, especially in California, it seems like.
yeah,
I think I guess that makes sense for the state. But outside of that, wouldn't we need more like affordable and workforce housing, like those types of developments? Like I feel like there's still demand for that, even if
yeah.
it's expensive, and with the government I guess, assistance, that would just make it easy.
So there is a definite push for workforce housing just because that's the number one complaint that residents have is that we can't afford to live here. For
Mm,
instance, you just had like a Pacific Palisades fire, and a lot of the people that work there don't have jobs anymore, but they didn't actually live there because there wasn't any affordable housing. That's probably a bad analogy, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that this is an issue no matter where you go. You're going to have the need for housing for teachers and firefighters and just people that live in an area. I'm pretty fortunate because I work from home, and so I don't really have a commute anymore. But some people, when you put these commuting maps together, we did a project in Nashville, and people were driving 30 to 50 minutes a day just to get to where they're going, and it's a tax on your workforce when they can't live in the place that they work. So municipalities are trying to build workforce housing. A lot of times that is more palatable than affordable housing. You kind of have a little bit of a stigma towards affordable housing because people, in their minds are thinking of like Section 8 types of projects. But um, a normal project can have 10 to 15% affordable housing components to it to qualify. And while those rents might be a little lower, you're more than making up for it in, property tax abatements and other kind of incentives.
Mm.
So that's going to be a big one. Senior housing seems to be uh, a big driver too. Medical office, basically anything that you can't do over a Zoom call seems to be doing okay.
Ah, that makes sense. And like, what do you think is going to happen given the recent election results and, with the new incoming administration? Like, do you foresee any changes to, I guess, the economy or just more specifically to the commercial real estate market? Because I think that, there's a lot of pro-business, right?
Yeah.
Sentiment there, which is great. But what are your predictions?
So on the federal level, the president only has so much power, with the most being kind of this tariff issue. We'll see how that plays out. No one really knows for sure. It's kind of a wild card here. And that's going to have the biggest impact on industrial, specifically like warehousing, distribution, and the price of consumer goods. Most real estate issues don't apply at the federal level. They're mostly, who your city planner is going to make more difference to you than who the president is. Just because they're going to have a bigger impact on what you can build, how you can build it, where you can build it, and then the price that you're going to pay for what you build it. So most state and local governments aren't going to be impacted, I don't think, at a giant federal level. And we Biden, kind of his legacy, I think, has been kind of a revamp of industrial policy. So his kind of landmark issue was tech hubs. So that is taking innovation and then kind of spreading it around. So you kind of had Silicon Valley Bank kind of went belly up, and then they were a major funder for life science companies and a lot of other startups. And to kind of fill that void, the Tech Hub program was trying to collaborate between local universities and local entrepreneurs to try to build ecosystems at different hubs throughout the United States. So, for instance, in Texas, there's a hub that kind of specializes in chip manufacturing. In Maine, there's a hub that kind of specializes in forestry management. In Montana, there's kind of a hub that focuses on mining. So each little hub kind of focuses on one or two things that can do two things. One, help small businesses grow and do kind of innovation outside of the Silicon Valley kind of tech bubble, and then two, kind of do government programs to kind of focus on areas of interest, uh, strategic interest, quantum computing, defense, autonomous vehicles, drones, other types of technologies that might have a military component to it. So
Interesting. Well, thank you for that. This is a really good, these are really good insights into the market and, what we can expect for the year. So, we're actually gonna, follow up with another video that talks more specifically towards the investors that may be looking into investing in private, commercial real estate offerings and the questions that they should be asking. So, we'll see you in the other video.